Wait, why is the Satanic Temple still suing you? Because the Satanic Temple is an abusive religious organization owned by two thin-skinned men who use their organization's collective wealth and resources to intimidate and punish critics. Okay, but why are they suing you specifically? Because one of the four defendants, David Johnson, criticized the two men, Doug Misico and Kevin Soling, by name and in public on a public Facebook page, using the men's own past statements, news articles written about them, and former member testimony about years of such behavior. This included things like Misico illustrating a grotesquely racist book published by his friend, himself an early TST collaborator, or Soling trying to be a cargo cult messiah in the South Pacific. The temple's owners then sued the three other people because they are malicious, but also incompetent. Four people had more resources to pull than an individual does, so we've all been able to keep defending ourselves instead of capitulating like TST got other individuals to do in the past. I thought you literally stole a Facebook page. Oh, very much not, friend. We can say that categorically, even with litigation ongoing. Facebook, now Meta, owns Facebook pages, and it could not be more clear about that in its terms of service. Nor could existing U.S. federal case law, which is a big part of why the Satanic Temple's lawsuit against us was dismissed in February 2021 and again in January 2023. TST is still appealing that loss, and then filed a second case in state court in April 2023. It's a strategic lawsuit against public participation, or SLAPP, so this and the expenses associated with our defense is all the point. But for Meta and its property, when you make someone the admin of a Facebook page, that person will have the ultimate administrative rights to that page as a user. And if you have a problem with that, you're supposed to submit a ticket to Facebook to have them settle the issue for you. The temple's owners didn't like the answer they got in March 2020, so in April 2020, they decided to spend tens of thousands of their supporters' dollars losing multiple lawsuits over that page. I could have sworn TST claimed you guys straight up admitted you stole it, though. The Satanic Temple's entire business model is predicated on claiming a lot of things that can't and don't hold up to any extended legal scrutiny. In this case, what TST submitted as evidence was a co-defendant making a post a few days prior to the chapter page changeover. It was about how he'd been kicked out without any warning or communication because he'd been CC'd on an email about sexual harassment and abuses of local leadership. So the context was him losing overnight his community of 5 years that he co-founded with no process owed to him when he had done nothing except be on leave to try to recuperate from burnout and a car wreck, then received an email. In a comment on his own Facebook profile status, this defendant, Nathan Sullivan, says, "We stole," in reference to a memes page that the local leaders had by then already said in writing and in public was free and clear for another defendant, Joshua Powell, known at that time as Lenore Calavera, to keep posting meme-style content from. So, not only was it not stolen because of how Facebook pages work, that page had already been officially disclaimed by TST's local representatives, and the person saying it had been involved in nothing more than being copied on an email. You can read the evidence and follow the timeline and see this for yourself. All of this is to say that not only was the memes page never TST's property to have stolen from them in the first place, there is also written and audio evidence that TST voluntarily relinquished claims to it before the lawsuit ever began. And TST has been chasing that page through federal, appeals, and now state court, pretending that an ultimately unrelated person saying that we stole a page is all the evidence they need to show that they were actually harmed. All the other allegations are ultimately just garnish at this point. If the National Satanic Temple didn't know about all of this back in March 2020 because the local people didn't tell them, or because their local lawyer decided to pretend the evidence didn't exist, that's certainly not our fault. That said, it's also doubtful it would have mattered in the first place because we directly showed TST's lawyers evidence of TST's relinquishment of the meme page in July of 2022, and yet they have continued to repeat what they know to be a lie in the courts and the press unabated. Their lawyer even outright admitted on Reddit that he was just making up allegations to drive up the costs and damages and to gain the audience of a court that would otherwise have no constitutional authority to hear TST's grievances. The Satanic Temple is very bad at court cases. So, how honest do you really think they're being? At the end of the day, these are the same people who fabricated an entire federal copyright violation complaint around the idea that a non-existent group was using their trademark with no stronger evidence than a throwaway joke made by a person who was not a defendant and has never been involved in TST to begin with, suggesting that his friend create an organization called the Satanic Temple 2 Electric Boogaloo. You're definitely making that last part up. Friend, we never have any need to do any such thing. Quote, from a friend. But the question is, will you found an actual organization? The Satanic Temple 2 Electric Boogaloo, question mark? The Satanic Temple 2, the second one, question mark? S2, the Mighty Satanist, question mark? Co-defendant Nathan Von Sullivan, Satanism Reloaded actually. Then, from the Satanic Temple's amended complaint, defendant's competitor organization, which was provisionally called the Satanic Temple 2 Electric Boogaloo. And skipping down, there is only one The Satanic Temple because TST jealously guards its property rights. Wow, that's fucking ridiculous. It sure is, but it's also a part of the US federal court record for you to see for yourself, and more importantly, it is perfectly in keeping with TST's long-standing business model of shitting out bad legal arguments and forcing someone else to bear the cost and risk of refuting it. This is just what the temple does, is made to do, and will continue to do until the court treats them like the vexatious litigants they are. Alright, wasn't there something about cybercrimes though? Yeah, because once again, the Satanic Temple's whole legal strategy is throwing gibberish into the air and pretending it has merit just because it takes the form of a legal filing. In reality, what they want to pretend was a hacking was nothing more substantive than TST forgot the person they kicked out of their group was still the rightful administrator of a Facebook page and were too incompetent to check whether anyone was still logged into a Twitter account after being excommunicated. That's really all there is. In January 2020, an admin gave 2 more people admin powers. This is the top level of power that exists for Facebook users and includes the ability to remove other admins. TST's local representatives presumably knew this because the way that Paul Tarkus Claypool Case and Leah Siri Sanguine Garbase got control of the memes page in the first place was by taking it away from its previous owners in the South Sound Satanist group, convincing the page creators to add them on, then later removing those same people as admins. By the way, in case our saying so in a blog is not good enough, we've said all this under penalty of perjury in sworn deposition. It's also really important to remember that Joshua Powell's takeover of the memes page took place almost a week before the same thing happened to the chapter page. During that week, as other members who'd been kicked out or had left because of abuses within the local org began to gather and compare notes, it became obvious that if these issues were not talked about openly, they would be swept under the rug and forgotten yet again. If you read what TST has called Johnson's, or ADJ's, manifesto posted the night the chapter page was taken over, this is stated explicitly at the time, from that March 2020 statement. It was only after being made to leave that this pattern of years of behavior locally became more obvious, and a lot of us found out we weren't the only ones that feel this way or have been treated this way. End quote. If, at any time, in that next week, TST's local representatives had taken steps to remove Johnson as admin, reach out to Johnson or the others expelled without process, or just not been so damned awful to so many people for years, then taking over the chapter page, To again post already published news articles, past member stories, and Maseko and Sulling's own words would not have been necessary or even possible. Using the Facebook admin powers your Facebook profile has in order to tell others about the ways their religious leaders do not live up to their own stated principles is not hacking in any sense, unless you're an abusive religious org groping around for more ways to build a slap suit. I guess I just don't understand why you didn't just give the Facebook page back to TST and avoid all this, though. The Satanic Temple has had the chapter page, the page they originally claimed to be suing us over, since May of 2020. Yet, after the case was dismissed the first time in February 2021, they have appealed and refiled multiple times since for completely unrelated things and against unrelated people. In November 2022, TST sued a Texas woman after forcing her to record the verbatim retraction they demanded of her for 2 TikTok videos that were, if anything, overly generous.
I don't even know how to start this video. I made a good faith effort to try to give y'all the information that I had that I thought was valuable for you to know. And now the Satanic Temple is threatening to sue me. This is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do for reasons that I can't even talk about. But here goes. The TikTok post I made contained many statements that are provably untrue. I regret having made the post and the harm it has unfairly and unjustly caused the Satanic Temple. I know of no credible claims that the Satanic Temple has ever misappropriated funds. The Satanic Temple's lawsuit against the Johnson defendants, who call themselves Queer Satanic, is over Facebook pages they admitted they stole from the Satanic Temple. I know of no credible claims that the Satanic Temple condones sexual assault or punishes victims of assault. I know of no credible claim that the Satanic Temple has alt-right ties. I sincerely apologize for my hurtful, misleading, and dishonest statements.
Maybe total capitulation would have averted all of this, but maybe not. Ultimately, the context is what else was going on at the time. If you don't trust a blog, it's part of sworn depositions. If you don't trust us, try all of these other people also there who shared their stories, most of them before we were even sued. This isn't drama, as some people uninterested in moving away from the status quo like to characterize conflict. At its root, a prominent member of a local group was sexually harassed for months in 2018. Nothing was done about it, and afterward, that person's image was used to promote the chapter for years as if nothing had happened, despite repeated asks to stop doing that. When, again, it seemed like the person's image was used to boost the Satanic Temple publicly at an event in March 2020, rather than reach out and issue an apology for the various ways that person had been hurt, 2 people started calling themselves senior leadership, then doubled down, unilaterally dissolved the democratic structures of the local group, and ramped up unilateral expulsion of long-standing members, including a founding member, so that senior leadership could control the narrative towards those who remained. And this was not the first time this had happened. The idea that the Satanic Temple's owners are entitled to profit off of all of the collective labor of TST membership and be able to do so without criticism is very much the principle the temple and its sycophants operate on, but there's no reason anyone else should. But what about the memes page and other stuff? There is no other stuff. TST had the rest of the social media accounts the entire time, and TST didn't even bother to try for the memes page until July 2022, more than 2 years into litigation, when it had grown from less than 500 followers to more than 20,000. As of June 2023, they still have never made any formal argument to show that they have any legal claim to the page in the first place. It's never been about Facebook pages. Wait, the memes page had 500 followers at the start of this? Yeah, or even less. This is pissant stuff. The chapter page for the Satanic Temple Washington had all of 17,000 followers in March 2020, and that's about how much it has now, 3+ years later. We've started 2 other Facebook pages from scratch in that same time, and grinded one of them, Anarchist Dreams with Queer Satanic Themes, to be larger than the chapter page, 20,000 followers as of June 2023. TST has been trying to tie a completely made-up value to those counts, that of $2 per follower, then refusing to show its work before demanding court-ordered payment from us. And at the same time, as they leave those claims fallow, they also keep explicitly admitting that they're really only concerned about their criticism above anything else. How can you say that it's only about the criticism and not any of the other things they accuse you of? The biggest and most obvious reason is that the Satanic Temple has threatened to sue lots of people, and other people walked off with their local social media, and even physical property sometimes. The only overlap of that Venn diagram is when the people walking off with social media also used it to criticize TST. But notably, TST has threatened to sue people for violating non-disparagement agreements when they wrote criticism on Medium.com. TST has sued Newsweek and its reporter for writing about this very suit in that magazine, and threatened other journalists for writing something other than rewording TST's press releases. Again, the temple sued the Satanic Housewife for making TikTok videos. When the Satanic Temple of Chicago's 2 leaders nuked their social media and allegedly walked off with the group's nativity display, "Knowledge is the greatest gift," those leaders did it otherwise quietly, hence no lawsuit we're aware of, despite the supposed loss of social media value. And when TST Los Angeles left to form Hell LA, they did it loudly and were harassed. The Satanic Temple refers to critics who leave on bad terms as shitners, and has a few dozen national members on their threat assessment team for monitoring online conversation. And it pays at least one contractor to flag defamatory content in any medium, such as podcasts. This is not exactly tough to pull together or point out. It's just that few people want to look at it. Okay, but please, what else is the Satanic Temple accusing you of specifically? If you were to ask them or their lawyer, Matt Kazaya, as to why this battery of lawsuits persists, they would tell you that the 4 of us: 1. Breached TST's internal code of conduct. 2. Stole their Facebook pages. 3. Somehow used the pages as a startup capital to boost a competitor organization called the Satanic Temple 2 Electric Boogaloo. 4. Conspired to funnel TST donations and members to this organization instead. 5. Infringed on their trademarks. 6. Defamed the temple by tying it to extremist political groups and beliefs. 7. Apparently stole numerous trade secrets in the process as well. Those are all allegations that the temple has made against us in federal court, and which they continue to pursue to this day, and which they hold up to any media outlet that happens to ask about it. All of these allegations are also bald-faced lies. TST has repeatedly failed to meet its legal burden of proof for any of these claims, even while given the explicit benefit of the doubt by the letter of the law, and has even occasionally offered evidence that directly contradicts them. When that failing is pointed out to them directly in a legal response, TST defends itself by simply repeating its assumptions more loudly and demanding restitution in the form of orders that the court has no legal or even constitutional authority to grant. The malicious incompetence played a pivotal role in their finally losing in federal court in January 2023. And while TST pretends to care so much about freedom of speech that it publicly upholds the freedom to offend in one of its core tenets, the reality is that in the context of this lawsuit, TST has demonstrated repeated contempt for the very basic principles of the First Amendment. Their frivolous defamation claim revolved around, among other things, the idea that saying TST rejected white supremacy was an extremist position that damaged TST's brand. And when the court said that it could not constitutionally determine what TST's beliefs actually were when adjudicating this claim, or risk violating the separation of church and state, TST complained that this wasn't good enough. TST is now appealing this ruling to the Ninth Circuit, in large part by arguing that any criticism of a church's beliefs should be considered possible defamation if the church is willing to argue that criticism resulted in lost donations. Quote, The Satanic Temple proposes to overcome the First Amendment's bar to its defamation claim by creating a novel, unsupported, and self-serving new doctrine. The Satanic Temple suggests that it be allowed to step into the shoes of the court and jury to become the sole arbiter of defamation claims against its expelled members. Specifically, without any supporting authority, the Satanic Temple proposes that it, and it only, decide whether the expelled members' statements about its beliefs or tenets were true or false. Quoting the Satanic Temple's brief, "When a defamation claim turns on application of church doctrine, courts and juries are bound to apply the definition given by the church and may not consider a competing definition." Ends TST filing quote. In other words, the Satanic Temple proposes that when it invokes a court power against dissenting members by filing a defamation claim based on their views of the church's beliefs, the Satanic Temple should be the sole arbiter of the truth or falsity of the statements at issue, without allowing the defendants to challenge its assertions. For example, if a dissenting member asserts that the Satanic Temple's fundamental tenets, including freedom to offend, favor racism or misogyny, and the Satanic Temple sues the dissenting member for defamation, the Satanic Temple believes that it should be allowed to simply assert that its beliefs do not favor these ideologies. The analysis would end there. Under the Satanic Temple's proposed new doctrine, the dissenting member would not be allowed to offer any evidence that the statements were actually true. Instead, the court would simply be bound to accept the Satanic Temple's characterization of its beliefs and rule accordingly, assuring that the Satanic Temple would always succeed in defamation claims or any claim relating to religious doctrine it brings against dissenting members. End quote of appellee's answering brief in United Federation of Churches LLC v. Johnson et al. Again, in its argument, TST actively demands that it should be the sole arbiter of whether speech it finds politically inconvenient is legally protected, and that it should be able to direct the state at will to retaliate against its critics regardless of any existing standards of constitutionally protected speech. To be as blunt as possible, this is TST trying to establish its own personal blasphemy laws. TST raises countless donations and headlines every year on the idea that it is a champion of progressive religious liberty and is uniquely situated to redirect the legal arguments of Christian nationalists to work on behalf of the same marginalized groups that those arguments were initially created against. This is pure snake oil to capitalize on the desperation and justified negative partisanship of the most vulnerable people in the country, and preys upon a widespread and fundamental ignorance in our country of the historical reality of how civil rights are built or corroded. But this narrative of TST has a secondary purpose as well, to draw attention away from how it actually performs in court and internally away from further discussion as to what its priorities actually are. And the substance of their lawsuits against us and against their other critics elsewhere all suggest that TST is not interested in acting as a refutation of Christian theocracy so much as it is in simply appropriating a small piece of that theocracy for itself. If you take nothing else away from reading this article, it should be this. The Satanic Temple is actively structured to be a greater threat to its own members and critics than it has ever been interested in meaningfully posing to white Christian nationalists running rampant at every level of government. TST is deliberately currently dedicating resources to crafting legal arguments that would undermine the separation of church and state further, and specifically to suppress very real and substantive criticism from members and journalists alike about the temple's history and priorities, and within the jurisdiction of the same Supreme Court that overturned Roe v. Wade in 2022. How can we help you? Money. GoFundMe, the legal fund for victims of the Satanic Temple. Patreon at Queer Satanic. PayPal, queersatanic@gmail.com, or Cash App, $Queer Satanic. But also tell other people about this, especially if you have a story to tell about your time in the Satanic Temple. The thing that they are afraid of the most is people finding out what they really are and how they actually operate. And we are doing everything in our power to make sure people know. Please help make sure that we can continue to help people. Thanks.